Hey guys, it's Sam Costa here with Butterscotch Shenanigans again. I want to show you a time lapse of a wood statue for our upcoming game that I worked on in the past couple days. And I didn't actually use any references for this one, which was probably why it took me a little bit longer than it should have, and I had no idea what I was actually carving into the statue. So it's probably always a better way to start whenever you're doing something like this. This is 4 times speed, so stuff is going to be happening really fast. But if you kind of pay attention, if you're familiar with Inkscape, you'll see a lot of the same techniques I used in the last one. A lot of multiplication, a lot of subtraction, and a lot of opacity changes. So here I set down the kind of base wood grain lines, got the basic outline of the statue going as well, and going for kind of a freshly carved from a massive log sort of look. Now, if you notice, I actually stopped using, or I've started using deep colors for the shadows as opposed to using blacks. So that's why that shadow on that there actually has a sort of an orange tinge to it. It's actually a deep brown. And I found that using those is something I can do now because I have less other stuff to pay attention to. And it tends to help bring out kind of more of a stylistic edge to things too, which is nice. And here I'm doing the duplication and the flipping and all that stuff that you guys have seen in my other videos. And this is just to kind of get a basic idea of what the hideous face is that I'm going to be carving into this thing. Don't worry, it turns out to be slightly better than that. So. Putting in some of the wood grain lines for the internal piece here. Shifting their style using Control-L, which does the simplify technique, which is something I use very, very, very frequently. I find it helps get roughly the shape that I want nearly every time, and gives you less nodes to deal with at the end of things. So there's a duplication and addition there, which turned that into a mustache. Now what I decided to do here was, instead of using the heavy lines for the carving, is actually just use shadows and highlights, because carvings don't actually have generally thick black lines all over the place. So I just thought I'd approach it from this direction and see what happens. So that means removing the actual eyeball after placing all the functional pieces there. And here what I'm doing with that stroke is actually grabbing the nodes above and below the eye and then breaking them with the break button up at the top left in the appropriate spot to make sure that it looks like they actually break around the carving. Doing the same thing here for the moustache. And I'm breaking those in the background and then adding the mustache into the actual base of the wood, so it has a black outline around it there as well. Here adding a bit of a highlight to give it sort of a nose feel. And these side shadows, I experiment with a few times. You'll see me delete them here in a moment. And the goal of them was to give the thing a bit more kind of depth going back, so it didn't appear quite so flat, which gets fixed a little bit later on. Just adding some kind of detail lines here. And shifting them to brown, dropping their opacity to about 60, I believe is what I used, and a 0.05 line thickness. So using those different line thicknesses, you can actually get some pretty different feeling textures all in the same piece, which is nice. use that opacity change to make those shadows again. And the second attempt at actually adding depth to the thing. You'll see I use a much lighter opacity on that one, so the shadows themselves are not quite as intense, which for some reason made it work a little better. Adding highlights to the bottom piece of the stump here. And then trying to look at the piece entirely and see where the colors kind of fall apart or don't. I thought maybe I'd carve some pupils into him here, and this I thought was quite hilarious. They ended up looking a little bit too much like breasts, in my opinion, so we had to cut those out. But I also, if you look at the carving, the reason they actually probably look wrong is because their shadowing is actually flipped. So in order for something to look like it's bumping out, you put the highlight on the top and the shadow on the bottom. And to make it look like it's actually going in, you would do the opposite. So that was my error there, which ultimately made me decide not to even put pupils on the guy in the first place. So.